Hi there guys, Tom Quayle here, back again, checking out some new gear, and hope everybody's of course doing very, very well out there as ever. Today I'm checking out a new product from the guys at Xsonic, and this is the Airstep. Now, full disclosure as they say, I kind of hate that phrase, but I'm going to use it anyway, full disclosure. This obviously is a sponsored video, but I want to say a couple of things about that. The first is, I will never ever do sponsored videos on my YouTube channel where I don't think that the product is worth your time or my time or is really, really good at what it does. So all the sponsored videos you will see will be products I think are fantastic. The second thing is this genuinely is one of those products that comes along fairly rarely that is just so well thought out, so powerful that it really, really is worth checking out, guys. I cannot emphasize that enough. This is a fantastic product. Genuine reaction. Now, what is the Airstep? Well, effectively, this, as you can sort of see here, it's a foot switch. It's a controller for controlling pretty much anything that you might have in your studio. You've got 5 foot switches along the bottom. Now, each of these 5 foot switches can send up to 8 messages at once to your devices. And the I/O on the back, if I turn this round, is very fully featured. Now, what this means is that the messages that this can send and receive can be Bluetooth, for instance, so you can connect it to your phone, your tablet, your computer, and utilize Bluetooth MIDI, or utilize effectively what would be keyboard commands. This can really function like a keyboard, so you can assign any keyboard command that you would press on a keyboard to any of these foot switches. That's insanely powerful because you could control your DAW. You could do scene switching for live streaming, for instance, switch cameras, for instance, on live streaming. You could use a video editor, you could do cuts, you could copy and paste, you could save. Anything you can do with the keyboard can be assigned to any of these foot switches. It's got full MIDI capability with 2 independent MIDI outs and a MIDI in. Now that's really cool because you've also got a set of relay outputs as well for controlling channel switching on amplifiers, for instance. Now, because of that MIDI input, you could even use an external MIDI controller or the Airstep itself to make a non-MIDI capable amplifier MIDI capable. Like I've got my Gig Rig G2 down here. If I connect my amplifier to the Airstep via the relays and then do some MIDI switching on my Gig Rig G2 or a Boss ES8 or just a plain old standard MIDI controller like the old Behringer FC1010, for instance, I can channel switch my amplifier via MIDI commands. Absolutely amazing. There's so much you can do with this. We've also got a USB connection on here. Now, that's not just for charging. You actually do get Bluetooth over USB, and it can receive and send, sorry, not Bluetooth, MIDI over USB. So you can send and receive MIDI via that USB port, or of course via the Bluetooth connection. It's got a 9-volt power supply in here, so they do actually supply you with a USB to 9 volts center negative DC power connector in there as well. That means that you can actually power the unit, or you can utilize the battery. Now, because all this is doing is sending signals like Bluetooth, MIDI, so on and so forth, it lasts up to 300 hours. Now, obviously, it's very difficult to prove to you that it lasts 300 hours. I don't have those stats. That's what the guys are quoting. But, you know, even if it lasted half of that, that would be absolutely fine. So, having said all that power with each of those foot switches, up to 8 different messages per foot switch, you can save 5 different presets on the unit as well. So there's a function button on the back, which allows you, as you can see, to switch between the different presets, so up to 5 presets. And it's incredibly easy to edit. So Xsonic have put together a really nice app via, you know, Android or iOS that allows you to connect to this thing via Bluetooth using your phone or tablet and edit the functionality of this. I don't think if you've got a basic understanding of MIDI and a basic understanding of Bluetooth, you know, in terms of just connecting to things, and they make that very easy via the app as well, that you would ever need to read a manual for this. The only manual you'd need to read is for the device that you're connecting to figure out which MIDI commands to send to it to get it to do stuff. But for instance, you could have this button be tap tempo on your XFX3. This could be scene switching. This could be presets 1, 2, and 3, for instance. So 1, 2, and 3. You can even do things where it will send different messages depending whether you long press on a button or whether you short press, or do you want the function to happen when you press, or do you want it to happen when you release? Do you want it to be momentary or latching, for instance? You can control what the LEDs do. Honestly, guys, this is so powerful. And all of that functionality, the keyboard commands, the Bluetooth, the USB MIDI, the actual MIDI connections here, the MIDI in, all of that can be combined into a single preset, as I say, with up to 8 functions per switch. So one switch could send MIDI and Bluetooth, and it could send, expression pedals, it could send relay foot switches out. Insane. The expression pedals can be mapped to anything that you want as well, so they could be mapped to any MIDI continuous controllers. It's honestly, guys, just completely crazy. So let's check out the app. I'll show you how easy it is to edit, and then I'll show you a couple of different ways that I'm using this unit, along with the Airstep Lite, which, as I say, is down here. The Airstep Lite doesn't have the I/O on the back, it just has the Bluetooth connection. So you could just use this as a wireless controller for anything that's sort of Bluetooth enabled, so controlling software amps, for instance, or doing the keyboard commands for controlling your DAW with your feet, or from the back of the studio, or from the control room, for instance. But the real magic starts to happen when you combine these in combo mode, giving you 10 foot switches or completely wireless control over the Airstep from the Airstep Lite. So you could set this up as your MIDI controller and have it cabled into all your devices, and then have this at the front of the stage and just use this to control the Airstep and every other device in the signal chain. So again, the possibilities are truly quite mind-blowing. Now, that is a whole heap of stuff that I've told you about there. So let's now check out the app. And then, as I say, I'll show you a couple of different ways that I'm utilizing both of these units in my studio. So here is the Airstep app, and it's really, really simply laid out. At the top here, I've got the Airstep itself, and then below I've got the Lite listed. And there's 5 different buttons per unit. So the Airstep has got A, switch B, for instance, so on and so forth. And I'm just tapping on the letters to get those to come up. Now, below that, we've got our MIDI in, which we can assign to do various different things, and then our expression pedal inputs, which can also be assigned with up to 8 different messages or MIDI messages. Now, the cool thing is, if you don't want to dig into all of these menus and really start to get into the programming, Xsonic have included a whole bunch of presets here that you can dig straight into for various different setups that you might have. So for example, straight away, I'm a Studio One user for my DAW. So they've got presets for Studio One on Mac and PC. We've got presets for Strymon pedals. We've got presets for controlling video lessons, because of course the keyboard commands that you can send allow you to control anything on your computer that you would do with your keyboard. So huge possibilities. We've got a YouTube looper. We can control, MIDI continuous controllers or program changes. We've got Logic in here. We've got some of the Kemper profiler kind of stuff, HX Stomp, GarageBand. We've got some of the Chase Bliss pedals, Cubase. A standard computer keyboard, so they'll do things like up and down arrows, the space bar, the enter key, so on and so forth. And if you think about it as a guitar player, even that might be really, really useful for you, depending on what you're doing within either your digital audio workstation or any program that you're using. If you use, say, a PDF file reader to read your charts on your iPad, for instance, then you can switch between the different pages on a gig using the Airstep without ever having to take your hands off the guitar, which is super, super cool. So as you can see, we've got tons and tons of available presets in here. The presets that say combo, like this axe control combo, will assign different functions to the Airstep and the Airstep Lite. So on this preset, you can see we've got on the Airstep preset minus, preset plus on A and B. We've got the bypass switch on C, the tuner and the tap tempo. On the Lite, we've got our scenes 1 through to 5. If we select a non-combo patch, so if we go to axe control here, what you'll find is that the Airstep and the Airstep Lite now have the same functions applied to them. And it's sort of assuming that you don't have an Airstep Lite, or that if you do get one, you would want to program that separately or have it do the same functions but wirelessly. So the way this would work is, if I'm in the axe control setup here, the Airstep and the Airstep Lite have the same functionality, but I might have the Airstep cabled via a MIDI cable into my Axe FX 3 or 2 or whatever, any unit. But the Airstep Lite is connected wirelessly to the Airstep, and then I can locate the Airstep Lite anywhere in my studio, on stage, in the control room, wherever, and control the Airstep and therefore the Axe FX 2 or 3 or whatever's plugged in completely wirelessly. It's such a cool setup. So you can set yourself up with 10 foot switches that do individual things, or you can have 5 foot switches doubled, but you have the Airstep Lite as a wireless controller anywhere in the room or even in a different room if you want to, which is fantastic. I mean, again, think about the possibilities in terms of, live switching cameras for live streams, which is so important these days, or for controlling your DAW for recording from a different part of the room, or just patch switching for live use without having cables trailed along the stage. So, so cool. Very nice indeed. So there's tons of presets on there. If you do want to go in and you want to start editing your own presets, which I highly recommend you get into, again, it's very straightforward. Let's say I wanted to program switch A on the Airstep in terms of its functionality. Tap on the A, and then we get presented with this menu. Now, this looks complicated at first, but it's actually fairly straightforward. We can name the preset at the top here, whatever we want to name it. Keyboard comes up on the device. Toggle mode, let's not worry too much about that now, but that allows us to toggle the preset on or off, or any of the functionality on or off that we've set to this particular foot switch. We can control the LED, what it does, whether it's on or off, for instance, or whether it flashes, whatever we want to do. But the real power is in the messages. And as I say, we can have up to 8 messages per foot switch. So message 1 here. We've got a trigger type. Do we want the message to be sent when we press the foot switch, when we release the foot switch, or when we long press the foot switch? And these can be configured to do whatever you want, basically. So you could set the same foot switch to have dual functionality. What do you want it to do when you press? Or what do you want it to do when you long press? What do you want to happen when you release? So there's a lot of possibilities there. Then we're into the message type. Now this is where things get super powerful. So you can send MIDI, okay, via output 1 or output 2 independently. And then you can send HID, which is human interface design. Now, human interface design is a posh way of saying keyboard commands. So anything you can press on a keyboard, or any combination of keys that you can press on the keyboard, you can send via Bluetooth to your device, be it your computer, your laptop, desktop computer, laptop, or your Android or iOS tablet or phone, whatever, essentially. The foot switch allows us to send out relay style commands via a TRS cable to our amplifier or anything else that requires relay foot switches. And then device allows us to do things where we switch the patches on the Airstep using the foot switches if we want to, either incrementally or go to a specific patch. Again, very nice indeed. So here we selected MIDI. The next thing we can do is select which MIDI interface or output we want to send that message to. We can select MIDI out, MIDI out 1 or MIDI out 2, the Bluetooth MIDI out, or the USB MIDI out. Now, they can be independently switched on or off, so we could just use one of them, or we can send to all of them. So huge amounts of power there as well. Then we select the type of MIDI message we want to send, so control change, program change, note on, note off, so on and so forth. This means you could even play a synth or a bass line or whatever from the Airstep if you wanted to, which is very cool indeed. This is where you would need to go into the manual for your particular device you're controlling to figure out what kinds of continuous controllers you want to map. So let's say the HX effects that I've got down here, the tap tempo, for instance, will be assigned to a particular MIDI controller. Stomp box mode will be assigned to a particular MIDI controller, for instance. The same with the Boss GT1000, the Axe effects, whatever you're utilizing, just check out where the continuous controllers are. And in the manual for your device or online, you'll find where all of those continuous controllers are mapped to. If you want to do scene switching on the Axe effects, for instance, they've all got their individual controllers. Program changes are easier. They just allow you to change between the presets and they're just numbered from 0 to 127. Then everything else, if you want that power, you've got it. We can then select the MIDI channel. So you could set multiple devices to be controlled via foot switch A, but assign them their individual MIDI channels so you can control them independently. And then we can select whatever we need, like in this case, continuous controller number and values, for instance. So there's a lot of power in there if you want to. Now, at this point, when we've set up our first switch, what we can do is say, let's add another message to that switch. This time I want a long press. And in this case, what I want to do is when I long press, I want Studio One to start recording. Okay, so we select HID, which is our effectively making the Airstep work like a keyboard. It's going to send that via Bluetooth. So whatever device is running Studio One, I have to make sure it's connected to the Airstep via Bluetooth. That means I have to make sure it's not connected to my phone anymore. So I'll save the preset first. Then what I do is I click on this key value and I'm presented with this fantastic display which shows me essentially a full keyboard. So any combination of keys can be selected and assigned to one of the foot switches. Now this can be super powerful. In the case of Studio One, I have R set as record. You could assign whatever in Studio One. It's the same in Logic, for instance. Hit done, and then when I long press on foot switch A, it's going to start Studio One recording. Now, in Studio One, you can do macros where, for instance, a single button press or combination of buttons, like Control, Shift, R, for instance, will do a whole bunch of different things that you've set up in Studio One. So it might assign a new instrument to a track and then record arm that track, for instance. And again, let's say it was Control, Shift, R. Well, I just select those buttons. That's now a key command combination. Hit done. Now a long press on that particular button on the Airstep will engage that macro within Studio One, and I'm away. I'm done. I've added from a single button press on the floor an instrument and set it to record. Absolutely fantastic. So a huge amount of flexibility here. Let's go back out to switch B, and in this case, I want switch B to, when I press it, I want it to change the channel on my amplifier. So I come in here and select foot switch, and then output interface. We've got two foot switch outs, which will take tip, ring send, or ring tip send, depending on what we're doing. And here I want to select one ring and then hit done. And what that's going to do is basically, if I go to latching, say for instance, it's going to send a latching message out to my amplifier to do the channel switching. I mean, incredibly cool. Very, very nice indeed. And again, I could name that whatever I wanted to. When I'm done editing those foot switches, I've assigned MIDI, Bluetooth, relays, whatever, my particular foot switches that I want to assign, I've named all of those. I can save it as a preset by tapping on save, name it, and then essentially type the description and hit done. And that's going to save it to any one of the, whichever sort of preset location at the bottom here, 1 through 5, I want that preset to go to. And as I said, I can store up to 5 different presets. So I've got HX Stomp Combo, I've got Studio One in Windows. I've got on preset 3 YouTube control, so I can restart the video, play, pause, so on and so forth. Number 4 is GE Labs, because I use Xsonic's audio interface with my iPad to use GE Labs, because it sounds great actually. And then preset 5 is patch changes for the HX effects down here. So very, very straightforward indeed. Now, at any point here within any of these presets, I can also go to my MIDI in here, and this is where it's going to receive messages from the MIDI in. So it's going to say through to, and I can send that MIDI data that's being received back out through any of the MIDI ports. But I can change its functionality. So I can say, if you receive a MIDI message via the MIDI in, what do I want you to do? Well, in this case, I want let's say a program change, and I want to trigger MIDI channel number 2, and I want the program change number to be, in this case, 13, so that selects patch 13 on my particular device, so on and so forth. I can send a controller change at the same time, or any other kind of controller, whatever I want to do effectively. I could even say, when you receive that MIDI information on MIDI in, I want you to send a foot switch message that channel switches my amplifier. Insane. Or when you receive that MIDI data in, let's say again I've got my Gig Rig G2, I hit the switch 1 on the Gig Rig G2, I want you to send an HID or keyboard command to Studio One and record. Crazy. So I've turned my MIDI controller, my Gig Rig G2, into effectively a keyboard controller, but in that case with like a bunch of different switches on that I can utilize. I mean, the possibilities here, guys, are massive and basically endless, completely insane. I can then come in and select my expression pedal inputs. Again, I can say whether these are tip, ring, send, or ring, tip, send. There's a test function on here as well, so you can test whether your pedals are working right. So you cannot set this up incorrectly. If you've selected the wrong option, they won't work. So just select the other one and you're good to go. And again, then I can assign that expression pedal to anything I want to. I can send it out to one of the MIDI outputs here, so all or just one of them or whatever I need, and then assign it to a particular continuous controller, and then as many continuous controllers as I want. So I could control wah on my Axe effects at the same time as controlling the volume on my HX effects down here from a single expression pedal plugged into the Airstep. Again, completely insane. So really, really, really powerful. If you want to set up the Airstep Lite, obviously you're just doing the same thing here, but you're using the switches on the Airstep Lite instead, and they're signified by, we say, switch LA, and then switch LB. And again, I can assign up to 8 different controller messages per switch, save this whole thing as a combo preset, or I could mirror the preset and, as I mentioned earlier, utilize the Airstep Lite as a wireless controller for the Airstep and consequently anything else that's plugged into it. So huge amounts of power from this. Again, this just sparks your imagination, hopefully, but it's crazy what you can do with this thing. So now I'm going to show you, just to finish with, a couple of the applications that I utilize the Airstep and the Airstep Lite for within my studio. So in the first setup I've got here, I've got the Line 6 HX effects, which is basically cabled in via MIDI to the Airstep here. Very simple setup. And then I've got the Airstep Lite connected remotely or wirelessly to the Airstep. Now the way I've got this set up is a combo mode effectively. So I'm utilizing all 10 switches for different functions. So the Airstep here, which is again connected via this MIDI cable to the HX effects, is effectively switching presets for me. So you can see here the first 4 buttons are selecting between those first 4 presets. And then I've mapped this button to tap tempo. So you can see that updating on there. Now you could have the Airstep Lite set up here completely wirelessly connected to the Airstep and mapping the exact same functions of the Airstep on the Airstep Lite, but I've actually got this in combo mode. So I've got a further 10 switches here. To give you an example, the middle switch here is going to take me into my tuner. Again, completely wirelessly connected, wirelessly to the Airstep. Then I've got these 2 buttons here assigned to the Kinky Boost. So that's switching that on and off just here. Hopefully you can see that. And then my Vintage Digital Delay is being switched on and off via this foot switch. So again, 10 different switches, and I can utilize those in combination with the 6 switches on the HX effects for masses of control. Or I could utilize the Airstep on its own and map the functions onto the Airstep Lite to match the Airsteps, then use this wirelessly somewhere else on stage on its own. Or in this case, I've got 10 different buttons that I can utilize and never have to touch the HX effects, which could be tucked away at the back of the stage, protected, never ever to be damaged by somebody spilling their beer all over it. So the next setup is using the Airstep to control my DAW, and this is completely wireless. Again, I've got the standard Airstep here. I also have the Airstep Lite down here, and they could be placed in completely different parts of the room. And I've got a play button just here for Studio One. So I've got play and stop functionality there. I can turn the click on and off, so if I go back to here again. I also have a return to 0 function as well, which will take me right back to the beginning of the track if I want to do that. And then I have a record function as well just here, so I can hit this. Lay down some more guitars or whatever I need to do, and then I've got an undo function on the final button just here. Super useful. So a really useful set of controls. Of course, you could set up anything you wanted as a key command within Studio One, any of the macros, whatever you want to do. And of course, then I also have the Airstep Lite as an extension that could either be for another musician or could be somewhere else in the studio. Let's say I've got 2 different setups of where I want to play. Maybe I've got a keyboard setup and a guitar setup, and I could have the Airstep Lite for my keyboards, and I could have the Airstep for my guitar stuff, and always be able to have access to recording and basic transport controls or anything I want within Studio One via the Airstep. I could even set up 5 different presets to control various different functions of Studio One. So absolutely amazing ability to control any DAW really, and there's lots of presets, as we've mentioned, built into the Airstep app to help you do that. So the last setup I want to show you here, just a really quick one, is just using the Airstep as a YouTube controller, which obviously is super cool for learning from YouTube or playing to backing tracks, whatever you want to utilize. So I've got YouTube loaded up here. It's connected, the Airstep in this case, via Bluetooth again, so no wires required. The middle button here is going to allow me to play and pause the video. I can then fast forward and rewind by 5-second chunks. Obviously very useful. Here's the rewind function. Again, super useful. I can also, if I want to, return back to the beginning of the video by pressing this button. So if I just click forwards again here to around this point, or very useful actually, if I'm playing the video and I need closed captions on for any reason, through my fingers than I do, then if I keep the first finger on, I should say, I find this way easier to execute. And it also means that at any point I need to do a string track. So again, a lot of control. Now I also have the Airstep light down here in front of me on the floor, so I can use it to control the Airstep, or utilize it as a separate controller and set a different set of functions on there. In this case, position. Let's say I was going to play like an. It's mapped to the same functions. So again, fast forward, rewind, so on and so forth, or turn the closed captions on, whatever you want to do, or return back to the beginning without ever touching the Airstep. So again, you could have these set up in 2 different locations, or you could utilize a whole different row of controllers here for the Airstep Lite and have 10 different functions within YouTube or any app that you are using. It's so crazy, crazy powerful. So there we go, guys. There is an overview of the Airstep and Airstep Lite from Xsonic. These guys are producing some awesome stuff right now, and the Airstep for me is one of their most exciting products, and actually one of the most exciting products for guitar players and musicians I've seen for a while. So, as usual, guys, if you click the link in the description below, you'll take yourself over to Xsonic's website where you can order the Airstep and the Airstep Lite, and you can also order a combo version as well, where you get both for a special deal. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons below if you enjoyed this overview, and of course hit that bell notification icon to make sure you're notified every time I upload a new video. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.